Professor Graham Peaslee from Notre Dame joins us live tonight. He was part of that team of researchers involved in this study on toxins in makeup. Professor, glad you're with us tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Marnie. It's a pleasure to be here.
I know that several major brands in the U.S. and Canada were tested, but the research doesn't go so far as to reveal which ones in particular contains levels of these toxins. Why not?
We looked at about 200 different products, and there are thousands out there, of course. So it isn't a statistically, we didn't cover everything. So everyone wants to know if it's in their cosmetics. And what we decided to do is we looked at the results, and there was no company with a fluorine-free product. I mean, everybody had some fluorine-free products. Everybody had some with fluorine in it. And so the decision was not to call out any particular brand as being this is the one you want or this is the one you don't want, but rather to sort of tell the industry as a whole, wow, we looked at all these things and everybody seems to have fluorinated compounds in some of the products. And we didn't find any without any fluorine in it. And so then we looked further and found PFAS, and we'd like to sort of call attention to the consumer and the industry through way of the consumer that these products are actually being filled with PFAS that aren't labeled. The consumer has no idea that they're there.
Right. Well, you got our attention, and your team noted that the substances pose a risk not just to our health through direct contact, but also indirect exposure. Can you elaborate on what that means and how much and how often before these chemicals are seeping into our system?
Sure. For all the Y chromosomes out there, this is not just for the cosmetic wearers. They go on the face, and they can go in through ingestion or through the eye ducts or skin absorption or something like that, accidental ingestion. But what happens to most cosmetics is that they're applied and washed off, or they dry up in the bottle and the bottle's thrown away before it's actually used. And then in the landfill, 100% of those chemicals are going to come out, and they will come out with time, but they'll enter the groundwater or the wastewater stream. These are forever chemicals. PFAS lasts for hundreds, if not thousands of years in the environment, and they recycle. And so they get into our drinking water and into all of us or our children.
Right. Well, it's pretty troubling to know that the ingredients aren't on the label. So as a consumer, when we're shopping, it's hard to know what we should be looking for. I know you're a researcher, but do you have any advice in terms of looking at the ingredients and making a safe choice?
There are some websites that will try to pick out the safe chemicals or the unsafe chemicals, more likely, in the cosmetics. And they're very good sites, but they do depend on the labels being accurate. And so to the extent that the labels are accurate and that a company can attest that there are no added PFAS to this, I think you'll be able to get the labels. At the moment, it's a bit of a dice roll. The ones we looked at, 29 products we looked in depth in, we found PFAS in all 29 of them, and only one had a PFAS listed on the label, which is not a good ratio. Some of it could be unintentional addition. It was a impurity that came with another product, and that might be okay. But there were several that were very high levels, were obviously added for intentional, water resistance or something like that. And those weren't labeled. There was no way a consumer would be able to read that label and see it. So there will be a few keywords to look for. You can look for the presence of Teflon, PTFE, or you can look for the synthetic mica that would be PFAS treated mica. But unless you see those words, and those are only on a few % of what we noticed, the rest of them were nothing to do with fluorine or the fact that they had been treated with fluorine or had PFAS available. So we hope this will be sort of a wake-up call to the industry. I think some of the industry will be shocked by this too and say, oh, we didn't realize. And I'm hoping that they'll get in front of it and sort of say, okay, it's possible to label these things, and more importantly, put a little label at the bottom saying no PFAS added, and that would, or intentional PFAS, and that would be a very clear sign for the consumer what to buy or not. And I think that with a publication of this paper and some attention, we think this will happen in the next year.
Well, we'll see. I mean, the cosmetic industry, a multi-billion-dollar behemoth. I'm almost out of time, but I know in your report your team cites lax regulatory requirements, and the release of this study coincides with bipartisan bills in the Senate to ban these chemicals in makeup. So who funded this study, and do you think that urgent action is needed based on the findings?
We started the funding unfunded. It was a student project, but the students gained a lot of samples that were positive, so then we had to seek some funding. We got some funding from the Canadian government, actually, to look at the Canadian aspect of this. We put that together with our results and sort of saw North America. Nobody had published in American cosmetics before with respect to fluorine. So we had followed the European and Asian leads and now did North America. And we were surprised at how widespread it was.
Wow. Well, really incredible findings. And I think it's worth mentioning these forever chemicals are in other products like firefighting foam, carpet, food packaging, and we're putting it on our skin, near our eyes, on our lips. So appreciate the report. We'll see where it goes. It is now being discussed at the highest levels of the U.S. government. Professor Graham Peaslee from Notre Dame, thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for having me.